Hey everyone, today I just wanted to make a video about which DC characters I think would be in support of Palestinians and their cause for freedom. Alright, first up we got Green Lantern, and I remember in the series where he and Green Arrow were paired up together, he was not exactly the most um, left wing guy, but I definitely think he would be apolitical or probably in the diplomacy section, perhaps urging the Guardians of OR to intervene, even though they would see it as far too insignificant a thing, as they have ignored far too many atrocities to care about an Earth atrocity. So yeah, I do think he'd be in the diplomacy section. He could also be missing because he could be somewhere in space defending it or whatever. Batman would definitely be protecting protesters. I think he'd like to do sabotage, but he might try to not go and do it himself, getting the help of some other Bat family members while he plans the way to do the sabotage. Next up, we got Aquaman, and he would also be in diplomacy. I don't think he'd use the underwater kingdom to invade and help out, but he definitely wouldn't be condoning the actions that are being carried out. He would not be pro genocide. Bane, he is a bit complex. He's not exactly a one note bad guy. That being said, I don't know if he would be involved. I do think he would be ignorant or doing something else. He doesn't care enough about international conflicts to get involved. Black Adam, on the other hand, he definitely would be on the front lines. His origin is similar. He came from an oppressed people, and when he got the power, he tried to give the power to the people and got them freedom, even though he became their king. However, based on whatever I've read, it doesn't seem like he's a stereotypical king. He's more of a symbolic king. We got Catwoman, and I think she'd be in sabotage. This would be an example of Batman calling up people he's not directly associated with to help him out with his plans to indirectly or directly help with the struggle. Cyborg would definitely be in sabotage. Green Arrow, I don't know if he would be going to the front lines, but he would definitely be trying to help by protecting protesters or sabotage. Harley Quinn, if we're considering the version that's running around with the Bat family post her redemption, I would say protecting protesters. I do feel like the Harley Quinn from Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, along with Poison Ivy, they would definitely go ahead and start sabotaging stuff. Superman, and I just want to clarify, just because I'm using the Injustice images doesn't mean I'm referring to the Injustice universe version of these characters. So yeah, Superman, if you saw the James Gunn movie, you know that it's basically a thinly veiled metaphor for, or rather analogy for what's happening in places like Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, Palestine and Israel. So yeah, I do think Superman would be on the front lines trying to save an entire nation from being a victim to a genocide. Yep. Wonder Woman would also be alongside Superman, and we will notice, based on how stacked the frontliners are, that it would basically be impossible to commit a genocide if these guys were fighting to protect the innocent. The Joker, I see him in the apolitical or MIA category. I don't think he'd be necessarily apolitical, as he has made a commentary on how he hates Nazis and he's a psychopath, but he's not a Nazi, or something in that crossover issue from way back in the 90s. We got Ares, and he would be the one who orchestrated the war by funding and pulling strings. He's a metaphor for all the war dogs, essentially, that control our military industrial complex. We got Deathstroke, and if you know anything about his history, it's super dark, and he's a very bad guy, and he would definitely be trying to join the IDF. Doomsday, he's just a creature with not a lot of intellectual capacity, so he'd just be unaware, or maybe the US government drops him in, and Superman's like, what the hell, dude? But yeah, I don't think he'd be choosing any side because he wouldn't be able to comprehend what is going on. Hawkgirl, if you saw the Superman movie, good god, I love that version of her. Isabel Merced is amazing, and I do think she'd be on the front lines defending the people, the innocent. We got Killer Frost, and she would probably be in sabotage. I could see her being in apolitical or diplomacy, but I'd like to say sabotage, especially because the thing with a lot of DC villains are they're not necessarily all evil. They do have their standards and beliefs, principles. We see that a lot with the Rogues Gallery, and that's why I'm gonna try to not make this into a heroes on the good side, villains on the bad side, because there is more complexity, even though it's DC Comics. Dick Grayson, Nightwing, would definitely be in protecting protesters alongside his father. Shazam, he's a child, he would see what's happening to other children, take none of it, and go to the front lines. It would be kind of an immature move on a child's end to go there, and he does have magic powers. Regardless, him and the Shazam family would be trying their best to save the innocent people in Gaza. We got Sinestro, he would be gaining power from the fear that's accumulating globally. We got Solomon Grundy, I'm guessing, or is that Frankenstein? Forgive me, DC fans. Either way, I'd say he'd be apolitical. Lex Luthor, now, this is a big one. Are we talking about pre Forever Evil, post Forever Evil? What is this Lex Luthor's moral alignment? So I'm just gonna give two answers. If it was the first Lex Luthor, the kind we see in the Superman movie, he would 100% be involved directly in the genocide. However, if we're looking at modern DC Comics, I would say he'd be on the front lines, sabotage, or perhaps like a financial diplomacy thing because he would have a company. It's very similar to what I said about Iron Man in my Marvel heroes who support Palestine tier list. So I'm just gonna put him on the front lines again because we're gonna assume that we're talking about the Lex that teamed up with Superman and is a good guy and is trying to do better. Raven, I think she would not be aware of what's happening, to be honest. She'd probably be trying to fight her father, Trigon, or whatever. So, Batgirl, I do believe she'd be in Sabotage. She's really smart and she's a bit more independent in the Bat family, so she would also be protecting protesters, but I do think she'd be trying to do some uh, larger plans. She'd be trying to execute some larger plans to help the situation. Lover would probably be off in space, although I can see him, if he's being paid the right amount, being on either side. So he could either be a war criminal, he could be protecting people, he could be on the front line, but most likely he's off in space and completely unaware. Martian Manhunter would definitely be on the front lines or in the sabotage section. He is an independent alien in that sense, like he works with the Justice League, but he's his own dude. He would definitely be on the front lines or doing sabotage by shapeshifting and causing havoc. Alright, I'm pretty sure this is one of the DLC Mortal Kombat characters, so I'm just gonna put him in a political MIA. I think that's Scorpion. I don't know who this is because for Injustice 1 I didn't have all the DLC. Zatanna, I'd say protecting protesters if she ever saw any. I could see her being in sabotage. She does work with the Bat family pretty occasionally. Atrocitus, I know this is going to be a little controversial perhaps for people who may not be fully aware of his origin, but he would definitely be on the front lines if he were aware of it. Most likely he'd be off in space. His origin was one of, what were they called? The man androids? The man hunters? You know, the robots created by the Guardians of Oa that massacred the people on his planet, which is when a red lantern ring found him and gave him the ability to get revenge. And that's why he's an angry red monster. Well, he was already red, but... Black Canary alongside Hawkeye, I do think she'd be in Sabotage. She'd be pretty good for Sabotage because she can just like fly by, scream at a building and fly away. Blue Beetle, I do think he'd be in Sabotage, but given that he's a teenager and has a, Peter Parker balancing your social life and your other identities, responsibilities, he'd be in protecting protesters. Cyborg would be in Sabotage. Captain Cold, I would like to put him in sabotage. These guys have such awesome powers to be doing sabotage, but at the same time, protecting protesters is something I'd see Leslie Snart engage in. Dr. Fate, I hate to say it, but he'd probably be apolitical because he would not want to intervene in things, or perhaps it would be so dire that he tries to bring it about in a diplomatic solution. I don't see him on the front lines. He's never been that proactive of a character. It's kind of one of his defining traits. Firestorm, I'd like to say he'd be on the front lines, but let's face it, sabotage it is because he's half genius scientist dude, so with their powers, they could do a lot of good. Alright, we got Gorilla Grodd here, and I think he'd be in the war profiteers and war criminals because he would just be watching humanity's decline and he'd try to help make it decline quicker. Poison Ivy is definitely going alongside Harley Quinn and Sabotage. They are a couple, they're a team, they're a pair. We got Robin. I know this is Jason Todd as Robin, but I could see him in Sabotage, although most likely Robin goes with Batman, so I'd say he'd be in Protecting Protesters. Okay, that's Swamp Thing. So for Swamp Thing, we're gonna put him in either diplomacy because the green is being threatened, or I'd see him be on the front lines because it's not like any politicians give a damn about our planet Earth. So he'd have to take things into his own hands. So it's dropping bombs on innocent people in the Middle East, really, that's kind of destroying the Earth's natural climate. We got Flash, and he would definitely be on the front lines rescuing people with his super speed. Cheetah, I'll be honest, I just don't know enough about her. I know she's like an heiress in the comics, so I'd say she'd be apolitical. If she's rich people tend to side with the power structures that benefit them. So, sorry, Cheetah. Please leave a comment if you think I got these wrong, because I am not as well versed in DC Comics. I started reading DC about 10-11 years ago. I've been reading Marvel for almost double of that much time. Deadshot. I don't think he's pure evil, but I could see him joining up with the bad guys in order to get money or whatever. He's got a few interpretations of his character, and I would still say, yeah, he ends up in War Profiteers and War Criminals. Scarecrow, I could see him trying to, experiment on the Palestinians and use his experimental gases. He's almost like a psycho, to be very honest, but let's just be nice and say he would be apolitical and uninvolved. Supergirl, I do think she'd be on the front lines. She's even more, short-tempered than Superman, so she'd be the first one there, I feel, maybe alongside Black Adam. So yeah, we got the Atom, and I think he'd go into protecting protesters, or perhaps diplomacy. I could see him in Sabotage because he's so smart, so I'm gonna go ahead and put him there. Although he would definitely protect protesters and all of that. Black Manta, I don't think he'd be involved. He would not exactly care. Again, he is one of the villains I am less familiar with, especially since his adaptations were not all great. He could go in the War Profiteers and War Criminals, but I'd like to say he'd be apolitical. Hellboy, we're just gonna put him in MIA because he's not technically a part of the DC universe. I'm gonna say the same thing with is it Raiden? Good God, I'm offending a lot of people right now. Red Hood, he'd definitely be in Sabotage. He couldn't get to the front lines, most likely. If he's really working closely with the Bat family like he has for some of the years in the last decade or so, I could see him being part of the protecting protesters, but Sabotage does make a little more sense for him. Starfire, I think she'd be on the front lines. She's a princess and she's just a genuinely good person, just a classic superhero. Apocalypse, I think he'd be, I wouldn't say unaware, because he is obsessed with Earth and Superman. Anyway, the Cersei, the witch, the enchantress, my bad. No, fuck, I don't know her name anymore. She's not involved in any of this. These guys fit right into the DC universe, so I'm gonna go ahead and put them in protecting protesters because I definitely seeing the turtles doing that. And I'm sorry, Sub Zero, but you would not be involved in this. So yeah, that's kind of my take on all of these characters and what they would be doing if the Israel-Palestine conflict, well, the genocide of the Palestinians to be more precise, was something that was a part of the DC universe.